Welcome. I'm Socratic Vet. Today, I'm going to get into a topic near and dear to me. Bear with me. I'm going to talk about it as if I am going through it now. I actually went through this years ago, back in 2013 when I came back from my last combat deployment. I wasn't in a great space, and an old mentor mentioned Stoicism to me as a way to kind of help me cope and find my way back because though we leave the war, sometimes the war isn't great at letting us go. So, since it was recommended by him, I decided I would look into it. So, Stoicism is over 2,000 years old, and as I began to investigate, I was surprised at how much controversy there is in the modern world on something so old, right? My curiosity is piqued because anytime there's conflict, especially of intellectual nature, I'm just like, ooh, let me look into that. Um, so I thought this would be a good one for us to digest. It's also a little bit of insight into the way I view the world. In this video, I'm going to explore Stoicism not as an ancient relic, but as a living philosophy. And through the lens of the Socratic method, we're going to investigate questions others posed about whether it is useful or necessary in navigating the complexes of modern life. And together, I hope we can consider what it means to live well, think clearly, and to act with intention in a world that often pulls us towards instant gratification and short-term thinking. I'm going to start with definitions, and since the intent is to bring this ancient philosophy forward, I will defer to original text statements and doctrines where I can. So Stoicism originated in Athens around the early 3rd century BCE, founded by Zeno of Citium. Key thinkers such as Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius further developed its doctrines over time. This school of philosophy emphasized rationality, virtue, and living in harmony with nature. Nature was defined as the natural order. And it's important to understand that the ancient Greeks believed the world was deterministic and that man's obligation was in how we would respond to the will of the gods. Stoicism centers on 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. I will define these in order. Wisdom is considered the master virtue, the one that shapes and directs all others. It isn't just intelligence or book learning. It's the disciplined ability to understand what truly matters and to act accordingly. I'm going to delve deeper for a second. Wisdom is the capacity to distinguish what is in your control and what is not. It is the ability to perceive reality accurately, to be objective where you can, and to choose actions aligned with virtue. It's the ability to understand the natural world. And to the Stoics, they considered wisdom to be the architect of the good life. It teaches you how to respond rather than react, how to evaluate impressions before accepting them, how to live in harmony with nature, i.e., with reason and virtue. In short, wisdom is the skill of living well, the practical art of making sound judgment in every circumstance. Let's move on to courage. Courage is far more than physical bravery. It's the steady strength of character that allows a person to act rightly despite fear, pain, uncertainty, and probably the greatest social pressure. Courage is the virtue that enables you to face hardship without collapsing into despair. Stoic courage isn't about being fearless. It's about refusing to let fear dictate your actions, enduring discomfort or loss with dignity. The Stoics saw life as full of challenge and courage as the inner resilience that keeps you aligned with virtue even when circumstances are at their harshest. It's the ability to speak and act according to reason when it's unpopular, and having the moral courage to stand for what is just and what is true is central. The courage to persist in the pursuit of good in all things. Courage supports wisdom, because once you know what is right, courage is what helps you to actually do it. To the Stoics, courage is considered essential because it protects your commitment to virtue when life becomes difficult. It prevents fear, anger, or pain from distorting your judgment. It ensures that wisdom isn't merely theoretical, but lived and brought into the world. In short, courage is the strength to live according to your principles, no matter the emotional or external pressures. Let's move on to justice. Justice is the virtue that governs how you relate to other people. While wisdom guides your judgment and courage strengthens your resolve, justice ensures that your actions contribute to the common good, that you bring good into the world, good into the society, good to the people you meet. Justice is the commitment to treat others fairly and to honor their dignity. And too often nowadays, we think that to treat somebody fair means to always be nice to them or to acquiesce. And is that always fair? What if they're being unreasonable? What if they're being violent? What if they're being a lot of things that aren't virtuous or moral? Would it be fair to treat them well under that, or would it be better and more just to show them the error of their ways? Just a question for thought, right? Stoics believe every human shares in rationality. I would argue with that. I've seen plenty of people that do not exhibit rational thought or behavior, but I think we all have the capacity. And because they thought that everybody shared in rationality, everybody deserves respect. And I think until proven otherwise, that's absolutely true. They think that you should act with integrity in all relationships. I can get behind this, right? This includes honesty, reliability, fulfilling your duties, whether as a friend, a citizen, a parent, a leader, an adversary, or an enemy. Justice is to contribute to the welfare of the community. It's not passive. It's the active pursuit of what benefits those around you and not just yourself. Justice is recognizing that we are all interconnected. Marcus Aurelius often emphasized that humans are like limbs of the same body. Harming one will ultimately harm yourself. Stoics believe justice is central because it translates Stoic virtue into action. It prevents wisdom from becoming self-absorbed or detached. It ensures courage is used ethically, not recklessly. It aligns the personal excellence with community well-being. In essence, justice is the Stoic commitment to living in harmony with others, guided by fairness, duty, and respect for the shared community, the shared experience. Moving on to the last one, temperance. Temperance is the virtue of self-mastery, the disciplined ability to govern your desires, your impulses, and emotions so that they serve reason rather than overwhelm it. Temperance involves moderation in desire and pleasure, not rejection, but refusing to be ruled by it. The goal is to avoid excess because excess leads to dependency. Dependency leads to the loss of freedom. When you are lost to addiction, you are more likely to be irrational. Temperance involves emotional balance. Temperance helps you to respond to events with clarity instead of being swept up in the emotion of anger, greed, envy, or indulgence. Notice I didn't say not feel. Being swept away by your feelings. It turns out emotions are great at informing us of the things we should be aware of. It's not so great at helping us make decisions. Temperance is restraint in speech and action. I mean, how many times have you over your life, I know I'm guilty of this, even in my practice of trying to be better. I can think back just over the last couple of days when I shouldn't have spoken when I did, or I should have held action and waited longer. Restraint in action and speech is the ability to pause, reflect, and choose the right measure. Neither too much nor too little. Temperance is living in harmony with nature and reason. For the Stoics, temperance is the art of aligning your inner life with rational judgment. They felt it was essential because it protects you from being dominated by impulses. It ensures that courage doesn't become recklessness and justice doesn't become harshness. And it supports wisdom by keeping the mind clear and undistracted. It cultivates inner freedom, which is the ultimate Stoic ideal. These ethical teachings stress accepting what we cannot control while exercising reason and moral responsibility within our influence. This is referred to within Stoicism as the dichotomy of control. And its fundamental teaching It teaches mindfulness about external events versus internal judgment. The Stoics view virtue as the highest good, intrinsically tied to living a tranquil life, free of destructive emotions. Tranquility is achieved by aligning one's will with nature and practicing self-discipline. Stoic practices advocate daily reflection and mindful acceptance to maintain inner peace. It's not that because I can't have ultimate control, I don't do anything. It's that I don't overinvest emotion in things I can't control. I deal with the world I am, right? That objectivity I talked about in those definitions. I see the world for what it is, and I operate within the world I'm in, not the world I would necessarily want. All right. So what do the modern critics say? I have some listed, and I'm going to go through them in order, right? So Neil Durant argued that Stoicism encourages passivity. He argues that the Stoic belief that a person only truly controls their responses and not the world itself is I think it's categorically wrong. In the article linked in the description below, he lists a series of actions that affect the world. And unimpeded, he would be absolutely correct. Where I take exception is he fails to acknowledge the unknown and untold number of variables that affect his course of action, right? Variables that he ultimately has no control over and based on his descriptions would have no way of accounting for. Now, I'm going to be fair, right? In my first video, I talked about this. I'm going to give him equal weight. And his examples that he uses are very flippant in their use. And without the ability to converse directly with him, I have no way of knowing, but by his literary choice of delivery, I will assume that the snark present was intended rather than going with he's incapable of the intellectual ability to reason out additional effects on his choices. But for the sake of my rebuttal, I think either reason would be irrelevant, right? My point is that every action he lists, the only thing he had control over were actually his actions and choices, not what the world did, and not whether he achieved success or not, right? And I'll use one as an example. He talks about driving to the shop. Neil stated that he is in control of his motor vehicle when he drives to the shop. And for the most part, he's true, right? You turn the wheel, the vehicle will turn. You push the pedal, the vehicle will go, or you push the brake pedal, the vehicle will stop. But what if his vehicle loses traction? Is he in control of it turning then? Is he in control of it going or stopping then? What about other motorists? What about the road conditions? What about blockages? Right? The list of variables between him turning the wheel and working the pedals are numerous and all affect whether what he intends to happen will actually happen. Right? He has an illusion of control, not real control. He has effect, but not control. And I can most certainly see where an individual could see passivity being advocated if I'm telling you, hey, if you don't have control, let it go, right? But I think you only come to that when you view the virtues as 4 separate disciplines instead of 4 skills that are not only complementary, but they intrinsically rely on each other to provide any positive effect in one's life. And I think that's where he messed up, right? On its face, when we're talking about the dichotomy of control, if I can't control it, I let it go, then why would I do anything that wouldn't 100% be in my control, right? I'd just sit on a hill and meditate for the rest of my life. Then, okay, but when I apply judgment or wisdom or courage, that even in the face of that uncertainty, I must act. Why? Because I have responsibilities, right? If I'm going to the store, it's probably to get food or get things for my family or myself to sustain my life and the lives of the people around me, my community. So I have to go. When I apply the other principle, the other virtues, if I stick to just that dichotomy, that observation of the world, which is what it really is, not a virtue, it's just an observation. Absent those, yeah, I come up with this. I just think he's incomplete and flippant, which honestly, based on his writings, I read some of his other stuff, he's a big fan of Nietzsche, and when you look at the way Nietzsche views the world, I can understand why he would be that dismissive with other things, because everything's a competition to him after all, right? Let's move on. Michael Ure. thinks that Stoicism can be politically disengaged, right? Completely separate from politics. He contends that Stoicism can cultivate civic virtue, but not necessarily political action. I'm going to be kind of short with my remark. So what? Right? And let me explain why, right? Stoicism focuses on virtue. It is I, as an individual, taking measured action, because that's what's in my control. What I think and do is in my control, to make the world around me better within my limited sphere of influence, is perceived as virtuous and moral. And by most recognized standards worldwide, whether we're talking about secular, non-secular beliefs and morality, if I act to make the world around me better, most of those standards are going to be like, hey, good for you. However, politics is not defined that way. Politics is defined as how societies organize authority, create laws, and make collective decisions. So how is me exercising authority to take resources from outside of my personal influence and placing them towards something else through authority that may or may not be recognized by individuals on either side of my action, guaranteed to be virtuous and moral by all parties? Is it not more likely that my action or the actions of the body politic will have varied unforeseen consequences that detract from what I was hoping to achieve in the first place? And for crying out loud, look at the modern political discourse in the US, right? These politicians are saying things thinking about the first order effects, right? I want to get reelected. I want this. I want this. And then the second and third order effects for the people downstream are disastrous, right? It's short-term thinking, right? He's in the moment. He's in the now. So my morality should be able to be separated from the body politic. Why do I have to be a political activist? How is that intrinsically moral? Until you can make that argument, I think your statement's irrelevant. Sell me on the first part before you dismiss something else, right? I just think he's doing what politicians do. He's looking at the first level. Now, the last one, right, and this was definitely a very modern take based on my experience in the military. I've seen this too much, right? The dichotomy of control is too simplistic. Again, I will be short in my response. And I picked this up from the mentor who first put me onto this. Like, complication does not equal better. I like the philosophy of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I believe early scholars of Stoic thought that are reducing it down to this dichotomy, because as soon as we add influence, right, which is what they argue, that, well, it's not just what I can or can't do, but I can also influence. As soon as we add what I can or cannot influence as part of the dichotomy just innately, we begin to strip agency and responsibility. And we can let the consequences of our actions or interference go with a simple, well, I tried, a whoops, or let's be honest, what's most likely to be my last words on this planet, that didn't go as planned, right? This makes it far easier to be flippant with negative outcomes. And it flies in the face of wisdom as a virtue, right? That responsibility, that sense of responsibility for my actions and what I do to the world. My influence on the world should always be in line with my principles, and I should take the time, I should apply temperance to take that time to ensure I have thought through the consequences of my actions so that I can't dismiss them and be like, well, I tried, but I've only got influence. No, right? Let's move on. So benefits and limitations of Stoic life. All right, so Stoics practices such as journaling, reflection, and acceptance contribute to improved emotional regulation and mental clarity. However, strict adherence, especially without a large degree of study, may risk early delvers into emotional suppression or neglect of legitimate feelings. Remember that feelings are greater, like I said earlier, it's great at informing us of what is important, but they're horrible at providing us with good decisions or courses of action, right? We need to take that time to understand that, right? We need to avoid the passivity, right? You need to act, because to know what is right and not act on it isn't virtuous. It's not moral, right? To shut off your emotions is not that, because once I don't feel, or I reject feelings wholly, am I capable of providing people with sympathy or empathy? No. Is that moral and virtuous? Absolutely not, because without understanding where people are at, physically, emotionally, spiritually, can I be just in my interactions with them? I would argue no. No, you cannot. So, but that's a question of study, right? And with a lot of things, I've met a lot of people as they move into Christianity or they find religion, their initial responses are very cut and dry, right? It's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The amateur doesn't know what they don't know, so they think they know everything and they make rash judgments, versus the learned or the professional whose question when questioning a course of action often starts with, well, it depends, right? Same concept. In conclusion, right? I highlighted the foundations of Stoicism. I addressed some criticisms, hopefully to develop a deeper understanding, explored how its principles offer valuable tools for emotional resilience and ethical living today. And if we apply critical questioning, not just to Stoicism, but life in general, we can develop a deeper knowledge, a deeper truth. And while it may not be all-encompassing, because it's not, right? Because of course it's not. Human beings are complex and most often irrational creatures. I know sometimes I am. The fact that Stoicism is stood, and I will venture continue to stand, as an avenue to provide structure and discipline in a world that often advocates for chaos and short term, perhaps we should look into it. Please leave a comment down below. Offer topics I should dive into. May your curiosity last and your desire to seek truth grow. Socratic Vet out.